Great.
Okay, so you really want to know, huh? Fine. I'm going to start by telling you this. And this is important, so listen up. Your entire life, this one and many others, you've been a god who uses its absolute power to make yourself powerless. Entire cultures, especially this one, have all been afraid of their weaknesses, supposedly. When in reality, they've all been afraid of their power. This goes beyond the matrix of reality. This is something much deeper than that. This is eternal. This is fully realizing your consciousness. This is infinite. This is evolution. This is our divine right.
All right, everybody, welcome to the podcast with the Greencast. This episode is really exciting. It is going to be some uncharted territory. Just before we get started, a couple of announcements. Please join my Facebook group. It's getting really fun in there. Secondly, Content Safe is going to redistribute this, so if we get a little too controversial, it'll be on all the alt platforms for your enjoyment. That shouldn't be a problem, but I might, hopefully I don't get too squeamish. We're gonna drive this thing into some pretty cool territory. I'm gonna be at the Midwest Peace and Liberty Festival, speaking there in Michigan, August 13th and 14th. Come see me if you're in the Midwest, or just come see me, whatever. And then I'm going to be at the Contact of the Cabin event with Grimerica, Joe Roop, and Brandon Powell next February. So check that out. All those links are going to be in the description. Today, I have an amazing guest. I'm super excited. Sex and relationship coach, Ellen Melon. She is the host of the podcast To Hump a Pillow, which caught my attention because when I was young, I used to hump a sleeping bag. So we have that sort of a little bit in common, and I am super excited to jump into this. This is not something I've ever talked about before, and yeah, like I said, I'll try not to blush too much. It's hard to see it through the beard anyway. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I found you on Instagram. Your Instagram looked great, and I checked out your show. And I really don't even, I think we had a friend in common or something, and I found you, and I was like, this is amazing. I really want to talk to Ellen. And I mean, just your name alone, Ellen Melon. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Is that your birth name, or is that your given name, or is it an SEO name like mine? Stripper name?
I've got a song if you'll let me.
I'd love to.
I'm Ellen, and this is my melon. And all day, every day, I be storytelling. I be typing, I be hunching, I be fixing for some luncheon. And back to the keys. Don't forget to breathe. So thank you. Yeah, I'm Ellen, and my brain is my melon. And I can't tell you over the course of my lifetime all the ways in which my brain has really held me back. Limiting beliefs, patterns, behaviors, all these things that were established in childhood and built as a coping mechanism to keep me safe, that no longer serve me, yada, yada, yada. If you speak this language, you get it. So our melons get in the way. And it's really our job to learn how they work.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, as a coach, that is really the majority of our work, and why a lot of people call themselves coaches. I learned this from my friend Ralph, who's a cosmic transformation guy. He's a cosmic transformation guy because, like it's like, I'm not going to go back to school for 8 years so that I can work with people. You know what I mean? When a lot of, and I'm not here to like poo on therapy or something. I've had a lot of good experiences with it, but
Same.
I think that there's a lot of techniques that can be explored and applied depending on people, where they're at and where they're trying to go. So
yeah. So I agree with all that you said, and it would be great to go back to school and get my LMFT and do the grad school thing, but I spiritually cannot go back to an institution at this time. That is not my modality. I have never done well in that. And that might be like a limiting belief, but I'm not really ready to unpack that right now. But I think that like when it comes down to it, healers and coaches and therapists, these people that are like light workers and healers, we want to do this because we deeply, deeply want to do this. And we hold space for people to let them heal themselves at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think the limiting belief there would be I can't help someone until I have this
Yes, perhaps.
pedigree.
Yes.
Mhm.
Oh,
Because
yes.
I agree with you. I had a large amount of contempt when I left the college institution for the institution itself. Like I was literally angry and like yelly and cussy and mad. And because I felt like, wow, this stole a lot of my at the time, I felt like, the institution had stole a lot of my genuine passion and curiosity and wouldn't allow me to, do a lot of the things and explore the terrain that I was personally interested in. I didn't have that opportunity until once I got out of college and I kind of got my degree. And I think this is probably true for a lot of people. I got my degree just as a receipt to show my parents so that I could throw my life away in peace.
Yep.
Just quote unquote.
Yep. Here I did what you want.
Yeah.
I did the thing.
Exactly. Yep. And so at that point, I really started to embark on new territory and make real, lasting discoveries that fueled me, and fueled my creativity and my passion to learn more. And then, really started to pursue, I guess, a liberal education at that point.
Yeah. Where did you go?
I went all over the world.
For school, for university.
University of Georgia. And I still actually live in that town. I live in Athens, Georgia, still currently.
Got you.
I left and then I wound up actually coming back. It was
and you're from Georgia? That's where
I'm from Georgia. Mm-hmm.
Got you. Yeah.
And so I traveled a lot, learned a lot. And I would say that, the passion and the desire to help people, if you feel that, you don't need someone to validate that for you to begin that type of work. So don't let yourself be held back by that.
You heard it first, y'all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cut that shit out. Just cut it on out.
That's right. And we do deal with a lot of limiting beliefs, and I can only imagine the amount. I'm starting to a little bit just look inwardly when it comes to the topic of sex and relationships, right? There's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot of stigma. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of grief and guilt and weird things. And I hear a lot of that stuff when I go and do comedy in comedy clubs. That's where they express themselves, isn't it? Yeah. Mm-hmm. But, and it's often, damn it, it's often in the theme of self-deprecation. And that's one thing I'm like, oof, comedy is built on self-deprecation. Is there a different way? Mm-hmm. I wonder, that's a topic for another time, but I'm like, God, there's got to be a better way to talk about ourselves to a crowd of people because we're manifesting with this language, y'all. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's been kind of a challenge actually when I started, because I'm trying to kind of bring those two worlds together, right? Of spirituality and comedy. And they don't really, that's very juxtaposed in a lot of ways because this side kind of tells us is separationist and this is what's wrong about the world, which is funny. That's what makes a funny observation. And then this side is like where everything is one and it's this beautiful love and those types of things. So bringing those together, it's a little bit funky. It's been really hard from a writing standpoint, but as I'm beginning to bring those worlds together, I'm finding a lot more out about myself and I'm digging a lot deeper into reality itself as a result of asking really fucking honest questions, because that's what I respect about comics.
Yes.
Is they're not just going to come in and just sip the Kool-Aid and be like, yeah, sure, what he said. They have to process it, get their own take, and then at least they think for themselves whether I agree with that particular person or not. So I have to give some kudos there.
100% love that. Honest questions. It's tough to ask ourselves and then answer. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It is. Yeah. I thought last night I was doing some work and I was like, what is my greatest fear? My greatest fear is that nothing will change. My greatest fear is that everything is just and I have a great life. There's absolutely, I have nothing to complain about, but literally my biggest fear, when I was just like, I'm just going to out with it, that's what came out of my mouth. And I was like, holy shit, that's very telling.
Interesting. What about what about things not changing is scary for you?
I just want to evolve and continue to build and climb and grow. What scares me is sort of just being stuck in a box or container and this same reality every day kind of plays out. Variety is the spice of life.
Yeah.
for me and most people, I'm sure, but I'm especially kind of a wanderer and someone who
Yeah.
really doesn't like to get too bogged down. I do have routines, but they're minimal. I just don't
Interesting.
have like a long, like I don't do like an hour of yoga, I don't do that. I'll do like 10 minutes of meditation in the morning, gratitude practice. That's it. And if I can do Wim Hof breathing that day, or, I can fit things in, but I don't have this like block of like an hour or 2 hours or something. Other than I kind of have to take that back because writing is that way for me. I usually
Okay.
do an
Yeah.
hour of writing in a day, but I don't have like so many so many spiritual practices that I'm doing that I don't have time to meditate, right? Like
Yeah.
I find
Yeah.
that happens if you're not careful.
Well, I'm hearing you say that you like to be able to flow and kind of do these different things and be open to new opportunities as they come to you day to day. But I'm wondering where this fear of like being static comes from. Is this like something that you watched mom and dad do, or did mom and dad like push this belief on you, or
I don't know. It's really new to me.
it's
That's
yeah,
that's new to me. That's never been something that I've felt before.
interesting.
But I think that I am sort of expanding, and that is why I really want to push,
Yeah.
into what the unknown is and ride that like fear edge,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because there's nothing wrong. Like I said, I live a very charmed life. I'm super fortunate. I'm very grateful
Hmm.
for what I have and the life that I get to live.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
guess
Don't people do that. People do that all the time. What you just did, I'm very grateful. I have nothing to complain for, blah,
right,
blah, blah, blah.
right.
And it's like, no,
Well,
no, no. But you can still have fears and you still do have
of
fears.
course,
So
of course,
yeah.
of course I do. And yeah, and so I just want to continue to build and grow. And I think that really is the fire underneath of that. It's like, don't just get complacent, don't just get comfortable. I think that was kind of the message that I got. Don't just get like into this, lackadaisical rest on your laurels. Keep going, keep pushing forward. It's just work time, I guess.
Yeah. I wonder, um, what do I want to say? I taught a 4-week men's group. It was called Conscious Men, Kick the Ego and Connect to Your Purpose. Um, and in there, we talked about legacy, specifically for men, male identifying people. There is this whole like, how can I leave something bigger than me behind? And I'm wondering if, and this is for you to unpack later, I'm wondering if you're hitting on that with this whole
Hmm,
fear of being static. So
hmm,
maybe
that's
do some
interesting.
self inquiry later. Is this
Yeah,
about legacy?
that's cool. I like that.
Dear Owen.
Weird
Yeah.
battery.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
do that a lot, but I'm sure that was an amazing program. I would love to. I'd love to hear more about that. When you work with men, what is that like?
Yeah, working with men versus working with women, as individuals and as groups is very different. The first thing that I usually set the stage with in groups of men is, um, I usually like talk about planet Earth and like, I bring in David Attenborough's voice and I go, notice how the male bird has created this wonderful nest and cleaned it up in such a way. And notice the way that he puffs out his chest and lights up his feathers and does a lovely dance to get the female. I was like, there's a ton of historical showmanship when a woman enters a space full of men, right? You want to impress me. You want to, you're here. Like the long and short of it is, dear fellas, we're gonna get messy here. All right. You have nothing to impress me with. There's nothing for you to prove. All right. We are going to get real. And I just want you to be aware that there's all of this unspoken sort of tension that happens when and I think it's, on the opposite coin of that, if you, Owen, were to enter a female space, you know, you, how would that make you feel?
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I
So
mean, yeah, it would be awkward. I would not act the way I normally would act.
yeah, there's all these like, social constructs and way of being start to appear. And so I think addressing that first in a group of men is important. And then, just sharing all the things that I normally share, like, I'm a codependent, I'm an anxious attached person, I'm a people pleaser. Here's all my flaws. Look at them. look at me, know them, I invite you to bring your flaws to the table.
That's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool. Very open conversation around shortcomings, flaws, things like that. Yeah, because we do put on such a facade, like, or I do. I should only speak for myself. When I've gotten into relationships in the past, I try to be something that I think that person wants, as
100%.
opposed to really being myself. And I don't. I'm sure that's incredibly unhealthy. But I guess it stems from feelings of inadequacy, self-worth issues.
It's all self-worth. Hell yeah. Yeah. And it's not to say that it's a bad thing to be what other people want. It does, however, every day doing this, it leads to resentment and this like feeling of inauthenticity, right? And misalignment. I don't feel in alignment with who I really want to be. And that leads to problems. Wouldn't you
Yeah,
agree?
absolutely. Yeah, because like you've got all this part of you that you're neglecting that is there,
Yeah.
what you resist persists, right? Like we don't look at it, we don't process it, we don't integrate it, and then all of a sudden we're way even further out of alignment of who we really are. So there's really only one thing to do there, and that's either to just feel powerless
Yeah.
or to make a change at that point. As far as like inadequacy, self-worth issues, how much of that do you think stems from sex and our relationships in, earlier as we're growing up? I feel like everyone kind of has maybe some things that are, I would say, I don't want to say abnormal, obviously, but like are different, like the way that they perceive sex, the way that they experience it,
Mhm.
and maybe some hang-ups or different views of it. How does that factor into that, us broadcasting maybe someone that maybe we're not?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's lots of parts to this. So let me first start with like, I want you to picture your, young adolescent self, right? So that I would picture like third grade onward is kind of like, I found porn magazines as a kindergartner and first grader. Um, and so I think a lot of what I saw in porn magazines showed up like, so here's in my experience with shame and self-worth, and that putting me on this path of deciding to go to, and that and those things putting me on this path of decisions to who I relationship with, I can kind of connect it to, I saw porn at a young age. I looked at these women with perfect breasts, great hair, no pubic hair, no cellulite, no acne, and I said, fuck, I'm not enough.
Mhm.
And that right there, shame was born. Okay. And when shame is born, and when we are in shame, the first thing that we should do is call someone up that we feel safe with and say, oof, I am moving through some stuff right now. Can you hold space for me? And the last thing that we want to do when we're in shame is tell anyone and talk to anyone. So you can see how this really gets us in trouble.
Wow.
Now, kindergartner Ellen had no capacity for this kind of language or awareness or knowing. So, of course, I'm on my own and I harbored this stuff for most of my adolescent life. But I think that like early exposure to certain images made us tell stories to ourselves in different ways that were not enough. And that mixed with the attachment style and relationship to our parents, right? Did my mom have low self worth? Did my dad have low self worth? What were my dad's friendships like with men? How did I observe him? What were my mom's friendships like with women? What kind of conversations did I share with my mom and my dad? I think all of that sets us up for how we relationship in our early adolescent, like teenage years, 20s, all that stuff. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. And I think at least my experience, it's very similar, right? There's images as well at the beginning, mostly images of women, which I think I agree. I agree with you. It's like, here's this, standard that's sort of pedestalized. It's nowhere near reality.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're first exposed to. And then, from the male point of view, there's, this very strong, able-bodied, in shape guy with a huge, piece.
Say it. No, say it. What's your preferred word? Do you say penis, cock, dick? What do you say?
I don't know. I like schlong just because it's funny.
It is funny. Yeah. It's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, dick, cock, phallus, whatever. And so we measure ourselves up against that. We measure ourselves up, when we're in adolescence in the locker room as kids. I don't have hair like this kid already has hair. All those types of things. So all that kind of adds up as inadequacies, even before we really have our first sexual experience.
Yeah. So
Which I
that's
think
comparison. That's what that is, right? Comparison culture. Immediately like looking out and being like, don't have that, have that. Oh, am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? Looking outside of ourselves to see what we should be doing and what we should be looking like. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. So we have that going into it, and then we have our first sexual experience, which is destined, doomed almost, probably to be completely different than anything we could have ever imagined or expected at that point. So it kind of like, I don't know, there's this sort of weird dissonance, like cognitive dissonance almost sexually, where there's this idealized version and then there's the reality of what it is. And those two things don't necessarily overlap. And then the porn culture, I think that's most people, right? Like most people are exposed to that before they are anything close to real. Which is, it is what it is. I'm certainly for freedom of expression and stuff like that. But that imprint is you can't take away.
Yeah. And we're too young to know how to ask for help at that point. I've had a lot of conversations with, I'm 33. What are you?
I'm 39, just turned.
Okay. I've got some friends so you the internet was born in the late mid 90s, right?
Yeah.
97.
97, 90. Yeah.
And this changed our access to images. And so I'll talk to a lot of people who were either, born in a place where they didn't have internet until they were a certain age because mom did good with boundaries. And it's been interesting to hear the difference in people who saw porn at a young age and didn't. And how there's this lack of shame almost. I'm sort of a pattern hunter when it comes to this kind of stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm really seeing this, people who instead defaulted to erotic fiction and read and kind of got to use their mind to create the fantasy. They have such a stronger relationship to self and authentic sexuality in my experience. And so, yeah, just for the people listening, porn, if it's been exposed to you, it has fucked you up in a way. It's fucked you up in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't see how it couldn't, right? And then, we've all, especially from such a young age, just like you said, we don't know to ask for help. I'm X amount years old, what am I supposed to do?
Right. And furthermore, oh my God, I'm naughty. I can't let anybody know that I've seen this. Right.
Right. I feel like there's definitely shame born there. Big time.
My parents are going to kill me. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
If I get caught,
totally.
all that stuff. Yeah. And it's fascinating and bizarre, but we're already in a uncharted territory sexually from an incredibly young age.
Yes.
And so from there, what do you think next steps are as far as confronting that and maybe getting to a healthier place? Like you're saying, the people who read maybe erotic fiction or created their own fantasy, which I think there's a lot of truth to that as well. Just like so many screens in our face and our inner eyes conceptual, and it's I feel like we can kind of burn our inner eye out by staring at too many things out here, or we can lose our ability to develop and cultivate images within our own psyche if we're not careful. So I think that's kind of the how that connects.
Yes. Yeah. So I think, what's your question? What are the next steps?
Yeah, what are the next what are the next steps for somebody who's been exposed to that? Um, how to unpack it and how to kind of start to deal with that shame, I would say.
Well, that's really tough. We all have a ton of shame from certain experiences, and we all are faced with shame on these micro and macro levels every day, even like without us even knowing on an unconscious level. And I think there's a few ways that this could go. I mean, a lot of ways people deal with shame is with coping mechanisms, right? Alcohol, emotional eating, those are two of my biggest ones. Um, Alcohol, not so much anymore, just because I never went to AA. I never was a part of the sobriety community. I love the sobriety community and I applaud them. And I think that they are the most enlightened folk because they've done the hard work of journeying inward.
Mhm.
But coping mechanisms are a huge resource for people experiencing a ton of shame. And those can really keep you down for a long time if you're not really aware that they're happening. Um, and so I think I was always like, God, what the hell is this? Like, why do you seek this? Like, what about what just happened makes you want to go to the closet and like make all the food and then like lay on the couch? Or like, what about what you're doing now or the thought you're thinking now makes you want to go call up some friends and go to the bar? You know, getting like that's starting to build awareness, right? I call it like becoming a master auditor of your thoughts and really being like kind and curious to your thoughts versus harsh and critical, I think is a huge stepping stone in order to do what is next, and that's understanding shame, understanding what happens in your body when you're in shame so that you can detect the symptoms and be like, holy fuck, I'm in shame right now. That's what this is. What do I do now? And that's what we call building shame resilience, right? And I think that that's the path to reestablishing a couple things, reestablishing your self-worth, reestablishing that deep inner wisdom that comes from our intuition and our gut. And I think inadvertently building stronger relationships and friendships and definitely more intimate bonds comes with that process. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely it does. And I love the idea to have someone to talk to, when you're in that state, whatever that like, because it is hard. It is hard to express that. But I mean, if you can, I think that you start to really do, build that awareness, and that's a great way to audit and to get sort of some perspective on your situation from an observer view as opposed to being so stuck in the moment and the situation itself emotionally. um,
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. I think that's such a great tip. And most people have probably somebody that they could talk to, maybe like have a buddy system, and the other person calls you whenever.
Well, let me ask you this. I've got a great support of a handful of women. We're talking like 5 women where I feel so safe to call them and say, I'm in fucking shame. This thing just happened. And they don't judge me. They don't try to fix me or give me advice. They ask me, Ellen, what do you want? What do you want from me right now? What you want me to listen? You want me to give you advice? Right? They ask me for consent and then they empathize with me. They say, God, Ellen, that really fucking sucks. I'm really sorry to hear. I've got a story that's similar. Would you like me to share? Would that feel good right now? No, it wouldn't. Okay, then I won't. Do you need me to say anything specifically? Right. And so what I want to just to circle back on this men's group thing, the difference in men's group and women's groups is that um, one thing that I notice is um, women tend to have strong bonds and strong spaces where they can go and process this kind of stuff. Men have, if they're lucky, their girlfriend or their wife. Men cannot go to other men and say, holy fuck, I'm in shame. I find that the language isn't there, the courage isn't there, right? Because of all of these male constructs like don't be a pussy, don't let him see you cry.
Mhm.
So my question to you is, if you were in a shame storm, would you have a male friend that you could call and say, hey?
Oh, I'm fortunate that I do. Yes.
Great, great.
I have some female friends that I could call as well, but I mean, specifically pertaining to something along these lines, yes. And oddly enough, sometimes my friends, I don't know what it is. They're intuitive maybe or something, but I was dealing with some stuff maybe a couple of weeks ago, and then my phone just went off before I could call anybody, as my buddy. And we started talking and just kind of let him know where I was at. And I have two friends actually that I could share this kind of stuff with. And my friend Sean's one of my coaches. He's also a comedy mentor of mine. And he told me about, do you want me to talk? Do you want me to respond or do you want me to listen? So very much the same thing. When he calls up, I ask him that thing. Hey, what's up? He's getting married right now. He's, trying to plan all this stuff. So I know he's like really stressed and I just need to send him his sweater so he can rub it or whatever, like, at the moment, it's like, would you want me to, what do you, and so he does the same thing for me. So I'm very fortunate to have a couple of people in my life, and my dad too, I could probably talk to about some stuff, sexual stuff with a father figure for whatever reason.
It's something. I've done it. It's something.
It's weird. It's weird.
I'm like, I opened this masturbation conversation, Dad, but I want to close it. I want to redo. I don't like it. It's weird.
This is comedy club material and not when you come to see me.
Yeah. But it's amazing to watch, like, so this is the thing that I need to be careful of as a sex and relationship coach. When I open the door to this, like, hey, this is what I do, people and they feel safe around me. So they just unload. It just spills out of them. And you're like, okay, I got to draw a boundary now. No.
Yeah, I'm not at work.
Yeah. Or like, when we're out drinking, or like out in the nightlife setting, and people are, in the cups, and then they ask me what I do. I'm like, oh, should I tell them? And sometimes I get myself in trouble and they just start to, like, their inner, when we're inebriated, in my opinion, our inner child already is sort of like on its way out. Because it really, alcohol just has that effect.
In vino veritas.
Yeah. What does that mean again?
In wine is truth.
Yes. In wine is truth. Yeah.
Latin.
And in bourbon and in tequila.
In bourbon.
And in grain belt.
Oversharing. Right.
Yeah.
But no, totally.
Yeah.
But no, that's that's amazing. I'm sure you've probably had people tell you things that you really didn't want to hear in those moments.
I mean, I have a really high threshold for weird and awful and painful shit. So like, I get it. I get that we are all walking around with our own pain and our own discomfort. And if somebody's willing to listen, fuck, it feels good to just offload that shit.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even know that they're doing it. They don't even have any language around, like, oh, I'm offloading on this stranger, right? Oh, my inner child's coming out. Like, this is totally not, unless they're super aware, right? Of what they're doing. They just have no idea. It just feels good to get this pain off of their chest. So I get it. But I've really been aware of, like, okay, I've got to set more boundaries and just be a little bit more mindful of.
No, that's good though. I mean, it is, it's good to share with people, because I feel like it's a very necessary thing, and it's something that's kind of sacred, like with people. Sexuality is,
yes,
it's very private, it's very personal. So for people to feel comfortable to share that speaks a lot about you as a person. And I can only imagine, working through this kind of stuff, because perhaps when we were very young, our first sexual experience put us in a place that we can't undo. So as we kind of come back toward wanting to be more sexually healthy, more, and be better in relationships, there's going to be a lot of sort of things to explore.
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of the things that I rub up against in long-term relationships, especially ones that started when they were in their 20s or 19s or teens, is this like loss of libido in women, loss of desire. We used to have a good sex life. It's totally changed. Kids add a different season to life. But I think at the root of this, in my experience, is actually like from the beginning, not exploring yourself with your own hands and with your own time, right? Like, I often will say for women who have like a lost libido, well, what's your masturbation practice? What's your pleasure practice? What brings you pleasure in sex, outside of sex? A walk on a nice sunny day, you know, a slice of, um, you know, a whole sleeve of Oreos.
Right, right.
Because that does feel good sometimes,
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So we define pleasure and then we talk about their masturbation practice. And, oftentimes it's like, I've never touched myself. I'm ashamed of what my labia look like. I don't like to put my fingers inside of me. And it's like, well, babe, this is part of what's holding you back.
Mm-hmm.
So establishing this, like, how do I want to feel in sex? What are my erotic points? What brings me pleasure? What makes me feel safe? Right? Tons of women don't get to explore that because, we just want to perform and we want to get it right. We're taught that men are supposed to totally initiate everything, right? The date, the door holding, the dinner, the initiating sex. And like, I just want to time out on initiating sex. I remember so much of I lost my virginity at age 15. And it was like 15 to 20 where I kind of went on this hiatus. And I remember wanting to have sex, like wanting to initiate it with the guy that I was with or with the boyfriend, and feeling like I couldn't because I would be seen as dirty or slutty if I wanted it. And I would like feel this like, the sensation of wanting to cry a little bit, this like frustratedness. And I was like, what the fuck is this? And it's because the world told me a story and I told myself the story that I can't initiate, and so there's just all these constructs and all these social messages that we really need to explore in order to kind of get out of that haze. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It makes sense. I love that as a practice, exploring yourself. I would say that would probably be very healthy for men as well. I'm sure it is for women.
Yeah. Have you ever done that?
I have done a little bit. I should probably
Yeah.
do more of that because, like, I don't know, for me, I think it's just so easy to just sort of make it like a job, like a quick job that just needs to get, like taking out
Yeah.
the trash. Oh, I just need to take it.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
bother.
Well, now time out. I would argue that like sometimes I literally will like load up the porn on my phone. It's 11 at night. I'll rub one out just like you guys would, and I'll get a good night's sleep. And like that's okay too. Like it all, sex is like this big thing, right? So I guess what I'm hearing in our conversation is like, how do we define sex? How do we define self-pleasure? What are all the definitions within those words?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel this like almost sneakiness and out of that shame of it's like, oh well, you got to do it this way, or that, like the propensity to fall into duality thinking, which is like it follows me around everywhere, right? Like I always have to be aware of that. It's like, oh well, this is bad. I only want to do this. But like thinking like that usually just shoves us into a corner and oftentimes gives us exactly the opposite of what we're really trying to do or to incorporate into our lives. If I were to say, oh, well, porn is evil and I should never, ever watch it,
Yes.
and then I do, now I feel shamed because I did, even though it's something that is part of my sexuality to explore. And it might be something that turns me on to see other people. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Totally. And like with that, porn is very informative of like, porn gives us a lot of information about what we like, our kinky, freaky, fetishy, fantasy stuff. And so like, oh, like keeping that tucked down and away, not good. This is like we talk about this a lot in the sex and relationship coaching world. There's something called the core desire. It was a term coined by Jack Morin, who wrote the book The Erotic Mind. And your core desire is the thing that you want to go to feel in sex. The thing in sex that you want to go to feel. So some words around that could be humiliated, adored, worshipped, collaborative, transcendent, submissive, dominant. The core desire is something that's very interesting because it's so psychologically and deeply rooted from childhood. It is usually born out of a conflict in childhood. And the reason you go to sex to feel it is some sort of repair around it. So, for example, if you were degraded as a child, you might want to go to sex to feel adored, which is the opposite, repair to fantasy, or you might want to go to sex to feel you to be humiliated, which is the repair to fantasy, but with agency. Do you see?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? So, and until we like, it's amazing to understand kink and fetishes, and in my own experience see how like, oh my God, there's healing when these things are met for us. When we sit with someone and we say, hey, I've got this kink and I'm really scared to tell you about it because I'm scared that you'll reject me or think I'm weird or call me yucky. But I'm going to tell you, right? And when that's met with that safety and that like, wow, I'm so glad you told me. Let me sit and think with that. Maybe we can make this happen for us. Right. Or better, if it's met with this enthusiastic, fuck yes, I'm so glad you told me. Let's do this. Right. That's even better. And there's healing that comes with that. There's childhood fucking healing that comes with that.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. And I think that goes along with, kind of what we started talking about at the very top. You're talking to our partner about our shortcomings and the things that we, are working on and trying to improve upon, and being open and honest about that. And I believe there's only one way to heal. You can't ignore something until, like
Mm-hmm.
that's just what you resist persists. That just gets worse and worse, and in the shadow repressed. So bringing that up, opening up, really makes a lot of sense to bring that healing, because there's a lot of different things that we can do to explore and to accommodate our partner and make them feel comfortable and at ease, and
Yeah.
not ashamed of who they are or circumstances that they had no control over that created the situation and the paradigm that they were experiencing.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Wow. Well, I thought it was going to be. I thought it was great. I thought I was going to be more squeamish, but I felt pretty comfortable, and maybe that's because of you being so accommodating, being so easy to talk to about this.
I'm honored. I'm honored to make you feel that way. Yeah.
It's awesome. Well, like I said, I've been following your work for a while. I'd say like at least a couple of months now, and I really liked your show and what you're doing. So I just wanted to reach out and talk about this. So thank you for being the first person to unpack such a really, I would say, intimate topic on the show. I really appreciate your time, Ellen. You have a lot of other abilities too. I want to let the listeners know Ellen is a sex and relationship coach, but there's so much that you do. I've been through a lot of your resources and stuff like that. It is not just limited to sex and relationships.
Yeah. May I say a few things?
Please.
I am a sex and relationship coach that works one-on-one with individuals, with couples. I also work in groups. I facilitate women's groups and men's groups. Right now, I'm spending the bulk of July kind of brainstorming how I want to launch these things in the fall, in person, via Zoom, and how I want to call them by name. That's, coming up with an offer is terribly challenging. I think you can relate to that.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I'm also a type 1 diabetic. I love CrossFit and Olympic lifting. I give a deep shit about the sober community, as I kind of mentioned. I think that they're seriously onto something because they've healed a coping mechanism. And yeah, I love talking about sex, pleasure, kink, fetishes. I think that our sexual expression is deeply tied to our authentic self, and getting that out of our system really allows us to be who we want to be. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. I couldn't agree more. It's definitely work that I've been maybe procrastinating a bit, but I'll look forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. It's like myself. Uh, I guess I've needed to sort of unplug from patterns from childhood to relationship wise. Like my parents did not have a healthy relationship. It was modeled as very dramatic, emotional, and they cheated on each other, divorced, like this whole big mess. So, up until recently, I would say, many of my relationships looked a lot like that. They were very,
Did they?
yeah, they were very out of balance and unhealthy. And so I've, over the past couple of years specifically, really been taking some time to focus on myself and try to heal some of the, wounds and expectations, address what I think about love and relationships and what love is to me. I know everybody kind of has their own definition of it.
Oh yeah.
Feeling. So I've been working on that a little bit just as of now. It's something that I haven't really done a deep dive on up until, recently, but it's something that I've learned a lot. I've recently read Iron John. Of course, I've read David Data's work and several other.
Iron John?
Iron John, yeah, it's by Robert Bly. Oh, it's fascinating.
Okay. I've not heard of that one.
I hadn't either. One of my clients actually wants to do rites of passage for young men. And so he told me about that book as well as Robert Moore's work. And he's like kind of a shamanic figure of storytelling and myth. And Iron John is a myth about a young boy who, and it's old myth, who loses his golden ball under the cage of this wild man that the king is trapped. And it's the king's son is the one who loses his ball. And so the allegory goes, the king has him in the cage. He hides the key underneath the young boy's mother's pillow. And when the kid loses his ball, the wild man grabs it and he holds on to it. The golden ball symbolizes the human soul. And so he goes in, he's like, can I get my golden ball? And the wild man's like, if you let me out of the cage. And he's like, well, I can't do that. I don't know where the key is. He's like, well, it's underneath your mom's pillow. And he's like, well, I can't ask her for the key. She's not going to give it to me. So he has to steal the key, and he comes back and asks again. He comes back, asks again. I think the allegory is like it's 10 years every time he comes back. So maybe by the time he's like 38, he comes back and finally steals the key from the mother's pillow, opens the lock, and then the wild man just takes off. And he's like, wait, you can't just leave me, like I'm gonna get in trouble. They're gonna beat me, And so the wild man takes him to the woods, and he kind of like comes into his own because he's unlocked the cage of the wild man, this wild sort of hairy.
Love that. Wow. Did you? That was I was with you there the whole time. I love myth. I love myth and legend so much. I'm like, yes, more of this, please.
Yeah, I've been learning a lot about it. It's really fascinating to me because we live in such a literal society. I think there's just so much that we can learn from metaphor.
Totally.
Yeah,
it's ancient. We love metaphor, and we love philosophical thought. I love philosophical thought.
I do too. Yeah, that's a fascinating book, and he basically just goes through the story. But you can find the story, just the myth itself, on YouTube. Like it's 20 minutes. Somebody could read it to you.
Yeah.
But in the book, he breaks down every aspect of that whole story. It's a little bit longer than that too. It goes on past the woods, but that's the basic gist in a nutshell. But
gotcha.
Yeah. The archetypes are very real.
Yeah. That's great. I want to be, so you sounded like you were wrapping up the show. I want to know, do you keep them at a certain time domain?
No, I don't. I just,
okay.
I know you had a heart out, so I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, we've got a little bit of time.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember exactly when that was. So yeah.
Yeah, we've got like 20 more minutes.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, I go as long as it feels right. Sometimes.
Oh, I used to do that. I encourage you to think a new way about this.
Well, a lot of times I'll do lives. I just had a live just now with a gentleman who's been studying UFOlogy, and that could have gone on for 4 hours. So,
but it's not the Joe Rogan experience.
It's not.
We can't. It's so much. And so, yeah, I've really done a good job about like, okay, it's 60 minutes. We get what we get and we're grateful for it. Yeah.
I like it. I like the shorter ones because those are cool. I did one with Athen Chiminti who does sidereal astrology, which is fascinating. And that was only 30 minutes. He was like, "Can we just do 30 minutes? I get tired." And I'm like, "No, actually, that's great. I love that because we can just be very intentional and just kind of lay everything out. That's great."
Yeah.
And it just kind of depends on the guest. I really wanted to welcome you and be conversational and kind of see where the conversation goes because I can see that you're type of person that could talk about a lot of different topics.
Mm.
So and just kind of
Yes. Yes. I did give you, I can talk about a lot of stuff. Yeah. Yeah. I could talk about the plant medicine, but that feels like an episode of itself.
I would love to talk to you about that at some point though. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah. Have you done it? Have you done
Yeah,
plant
I'm
medicine?
I'm a little familiar with some of the entheogen.
Do you talk about it on the show?
I haven't in depth really yet, but it is something that I do want to unpack. I don't teach it because, well, obviously, there's some reasons why I just won't do that. When I work
Hmm.
with people, as far as like letting go and release, I give exercises that can be applied. But I
Yeah.
find that plant medicine is also a really good way to explore some of that stuff.
Yeah. Totally. Totally. What have you found to be very helpful for yourself?
I mean, when I was in college, I was a bit of a psychonaut, but I never really came at it with the recreational mind frame. It was always something to explore for me. So even when I was younger, it was really about learning and experiencing and asking questions and deepening my relationship with the universe. But I've
Yeah.
used LSD, I've used mushrooms, DMT, ayahuasca. I've never done iboga, but I found all of those to be helpful for me. And I've had a lot of different experiences, even with the same substances. Smaller doses, larger doses. You just never know with the stuff.
Hmm.
I feel
Hmm.
like there's definitely something cosmic with that. I guess I've done mescaline too now that I think about it.
I'm not on mescaline.
It's interesting. Like it definitely doesn't feel good on the stomach. Um,
Oh,
but
okay. Yeah.
you know, everything kind of has this sort of Southwest almost shade to it. It has this texture,
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
very distinct, very distinct. So, yeah, so that's something that I think is very interesting. And there's a lot to explore there. I would love to talk about that sometime. We should.
Okay, sweet. Yeah. I'd love to talk about it too. There was a lot to unpack with that last ayahuasca retreat.
Oh my gosh, where was it?
I went to Florida.
Okay.
Yeah. I went to Florida to a place called Soul Quest Church of, what is it? Soul Quest Ayahuasca Church of Mother Earth is what it's called, right outside of Orlando. I knew it would come to the United States at some point. I wouldn't have to go to South America, and it's here. And so, yeah, there's a lot of prep that went into it. Like you have to really prep your body for the spiritual awakening, and you don't know what you're going to expect. And it was heavy. It was heavy, but
Yeah. Did you see things? Did things come back to you that you kind of forgot about in your experience?
I didn't see. I like there wasn't this like visual. Like I didn't leave the planet. Well, I don't know. A lot happens in an ayahuasca journey. Um, I did feel like I was in another world at some point in the nighttime ceremony, and yeah, given what they say that my mother ayahuasca gives you not what you want, but exactly what you need, and I didn't know it at the time, but what I needed was to grieve my 8-year relationship that I had not grieved a couple years ago. Um, and my type 1 diabetic diagnosis a couple years ago, just haven't really like hadn't just sat with that and just felt the pain. Yeah. It taught me a lot about ayahuasca taught me a lot about what it means to grieve and what it means to slow ourselves down and be kind to ourselves and say, you know what, workplace and social calendar and, to-do list, fuck off. I've got to sit and grieve. That was really magical. Yeah.
I've had a lot of magical experiences with those settings, if I'm being honest. And sometimes I feel like it almost disqualifies what you take from it, like almost as if I say, oh, well, I had this experience on this, because of the plant medicine, because I induced something, then it must disqualify it. I feel, but I know that that's not true. It doesn't matter. Like in my world, it doesn't really matter how I came to the conclusion. If the conclusion is, applicable, true for me, right?
Mm-hmm,
Then it
mm-hmm.
doesn't really matter. They say like a broken clock is right twice a day. It doesn't really matter where the lesson, I guess, originates from. I've had lessons of like processing how much how much I've avoided things, avoidance,
Yes.
literally
Mhm.
being chased down by like, do your fucking taxes, shit like that in a trip. And it's like, dude, this is not, I didn't expect that avoidance and just like, like just heaving that out, like getting rid of all of that, because there's a lot of that. And like digging back into the past with alcohol and blacking out and doing things like that. Like I didn't need 12 steps. One is fine. Stop drinking, Owen,
Yeah.
that was a step. And I can still I don't, but I have a lot of friends who also have taken the program. I have a lot of admiration and respect for them. I haven't done that, but I got to the point where I maybe would have. And
Yeah.
that's when I
Yeah.
said,
Say more about your relationship with alcohol as it exists today.
as it exists today, like I can go to dinner and have like a margarita or two, and then it just makes me kind of loopy and tired. I'm just come home. If I went to the store and like bought like a 12 pack, I could come home and drink it and just get like blah. But I don't do that anymore. Like
Yeah.
I used to, and sometimes that's how I would cope with things. If I was upset or not happy with where I was, then I would again avoidance and drink to cope. And so a lot of that avoidance is what caught up with me. And I've had some incredibly like powerfully unconditional love type of experiences as well. And that's generally speaking what I have had, but also when it comes to it, like I feel like I'm here for a reason, and that I have a bit of an obligation. Obligation might be a strong word, but I believe that I'm here for a purpose, and so I want to make sure that I'm being honest and dealing with the things that are problematic in my life, so that I can give more of a gift, to posterity, leave a little bit of something as a result of that. So I've gone down those roads in an attempt to heal, and it's been pretty helpful. I think a lot of people can kind of confuse the work too. I know people who maybe take the psychedelics themselves a little too far, saying, "Oh, this is the work. Let's dose up and do the work."
Yeah. Well, it's not, I've seen some people do microdosing and get shit faced on a Friday, Saturday night. And I'm like, that is not the healing, my friend.
Right. Yeah. I think, when we go into that world and we get a message, the message is, hey, take this into your daily life and apply this. Stop avoiding things, Owen, and do your fucking taxes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
have like a fucking spirit telling you to do your taxes is kind of one of the more hilarious things.
It is. Yeah.
A juxtaposition, but it makes a lot of sense. And I hear that and I'm like, okay, cool. Because I'm self-sabotaging through avoidance, I'm getting the message that that's how I'm self-sabotaging, which if you don't have perspective, it's impossible to know how you're self-sabotaging. So fortunately, it opens up the door for me to be a better observer and say, okay, cool. I self-sabotage through avoidance. I need to face things. I need to open this card statement.
There's something here for me. Yep. Totally. Yep.
So
God damn it, alcohol. You're so available. You're so available everywhere.
and pot's getting like that too now, and
Yeah, but I feel like pot is a heart opener. Like it, I don't think that it destroys lives the way alcohol does.
I agree with you 100%. I couldn't agree more. But you can still use it to cope. I mean, anything can be a
Totally.
healthy
Totally.
addiction. The gym even can be.
Shopping, overworking out. Yes.
Yeah,
Too
so,
much masturbation. Totally.
right.
Totally. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we've got a few minutes left, right? What is there any other like is there any burning questions that you wanted to ask me? Like don't hold back, I'm really open here.
Okay. Well, since your podcast is called To Hump a Pillow, let's
Yeah.
talk about, is that how you personally started out on your sexual
Oh,
exploration?
oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. So I've talked to a lot of women about this. Like when did you find out that like something in your genitals felt good? Like how did that like come up, And there's this very I probably should like really like do the research on this and like poll a really good sample, but based on just, friendships and women's groups, there's this like we found it when we were really young and we knew it was something good, or like we didn't touch it, we didn't pay any attention to it until we were like in our adolescent teenage years. And so there's this pretty big split. And so I found what I'm assuming is my clitoris at a young age. And so like I would, you know, um, I just remember like, I don't remember the first time it happened, but I think it was something like climbing a tree or something and like rubbing the branch, like while my legs were around it and being like, whoa, what's going on here? Right. That first like, whoa, this feels good. And then like I think in bed it was like moving stuffed animals around and then like being like on one and then being like, whoa, this feels good. And then it was humping stuffed animals and pillows for days, for days on end. And being like, oh my God, if somebody fucking walks in, what do I do? Always, always. And like something so funny that I'll tell my mom, she's a very Christian woman, and she would always be like, your guardian angels are watching you always, always. And I would be, this little girl, like, 6 years old, 7 years old. And I would be like, fuck, grandma? Oh, Uncle Tom?
Yes. No, I
Yeah.
felt that way too. My parents were Christian too. So, if it wasn't even that, it's just that, God is watching you. My grandmother would say,
Oh,
Jesus is watching you. And it's like, whoa, man, that guy must be like, yeah, he must be into some weird shit because
yeah.
if he's watching me,
Yeah.
like,
God is a big fucking voyeur and he loves your exhibitionism.
that's right.
I do believe there's this amazing book that is the kind of the corner, one of the backbones of my coaching. It's called Existential Kink. And it's about shadow work, and it's by Dr. Carolyn Elliott. And this book is very heady and cerebral. It's very Carl Jungian. So it's, I can see how some people might open it and be like, what? But she talks about how God is one kinky motherfucker. If we're really seeing the big picture, right? Because we're like, are you familiar with shadow work?
Yes.
Yes. So shadow work, for those listening and that don't know, is shadow work is, we are a whole person, but we're born into a world that says that we have to be certain things, right? We have to be pure. We have to be good. We have to be kind. But what about all these other things that we really want to be, that we can't be? Like, we want to be humiliated, or we want to be degraded, or we want to be the rebel, or we want to be the villain. And so shadow work is sort of the integrating the dark and the light to become a whole person, and really sort of uncovering and resurrecting these unconscious desires that typically keep attracting certain patterns and certain cycles into our life. For me, one of them was like, I loved playing the victim. Loved having pity parties, love inviting my people to Victimville, and like just sitting in my sad. And I was like, wow, when I figured this out, I was like, wow, this is the thing that's been holding me back in a lot of ways. So
Wow. Yeah.
I highly recommend.
Wow. Yeah, I'll check that out. And I think we just got the title of the episode too. God is a kinky motherfucker.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And I think
Good.
a lot of us are running a victimhood script. So that's a good place to check in and maybe just do a little bit of an audit. That's something I
Yes.
definitely am also working on myself.
Are you do you think you love to play the victim too?
I think we all have a propensity for that. We all like to tell those war stories. If you open up to somebody, they immediately tell you the worst thing that happened.
Well, that's also a way of connection. That's a way we connect, right? That's the way we bid for emotional connection, I would argue.
Hmm.
Um, but I would also say that, this playing the victim is playing the victim upon my findings is there's more to it than just unconscious desire to be the victim and pity yourself. There is this like trauma component to it. It's like at some point in my childhood, I felt this lack of belonging. I felt like there was something wrong with me, lack of belonging. And that can really put you on that path of being the victim. We see there was this amazing documentary called The Wisdom of Trauma,
Hmm.
with what's his name? Dr. Gab Gabe Yiramonte. What's his name? I forget his name. I'm sorry. Um, and Gabor Mate.
Oh
Gabor
yeah,
Mate.
yeah.
Gabor Mate. And he, a lot of the people in the documentary were addicts and homeless and people who have gone through this, recovery or haven't. And the common theme is fucking trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And trauma doesn't necessarily mean that were a vet over in Iraq and you saw a lot of ugly shit. Like that's extreme and people are suffering from that. Yes. But trauma is also in the form of subtle emotional neglect.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yeah, that was a really, really important documentary that kind of made me wake up a bit about my trauma. But
That's amazing.
yeah.
Well, cool. Thank you so much for taking the time with me. I really appreciate it. It's been a great episode. I really enjoyed it. Please let us know how best to get in touch with you, and the current courses that you're going to be offering.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, let me get those up. So I'm just putting those together. Thank you for asking.
Of course, no, it's exciting.
Okay, so I am Ellen Melon. I am a sex and relationship coach, and you can find me on most social media platforms at Ellen Melon Show. I'm most active on probably YouTube and Instagram. My website's ellenmelon.com, and the workshops that I'm looking to launch come fall is boundary setting and self-advocacy, the art of asking for what you want because you're worth it. Pleasure, permission, and core desire. This is an ongoing workshop that I teach, understanding purity culture and discovering what you actually want in sex and in life. And then number 3, I love teaching about shame. I love teaching about shame resilience. I love teaching about comparison culture and just the harm that it causes. And I've been a person who has been taking things personally most of my life. And so shame has played a huge role in my life. So my workshop is called I'm Not Enough. It's understanding comparison culture, shame, and empathy's impact on our nervous system. And then I teach about attachment theory. So learn your attachment style, learn generational attachment wounds, and how to exhibit secure attachment for your kids and in relationships.
Amazing. Wow. That's quite some offer. You've done some extensive work on this stuff, and I'm always impressed when I have coaches on the show. It's funny. I can't help it because there's something funny about the idea of coaching, but God, man, it's so necessary, and the amount of work that people do to uncover, things that are broken within us is amazing. So thank you so much for all your work. I think it's awesome. Let me know if I can help you, and I'll be sure to put all those links in the show notes of the podcast on YouTube as well as on the RSS feed. So people, please go and check out Ellen's stuff. She's doing a lot of amazing work, an amazing job, and your Instagram super fun. So
Thank you so much, Owen. Such a pleasure to be here. I appreciate the invitation very
Oh, it
much.
was so much fun. I'm so glad that you accepted. So thank you. And we'll talk again. We'll do a plant medicine episode. Sounds fun.
I would love that. I would love that. Yeah.